Hoch dir.
Shabbat shalom to everyone. Well, this week I had one of those moments that can be described as an I honestly don't know what came over me moment. The story may not continue the way you think it will. Probably when I was looking at my calendar and realizing I had an unexpected block of time open, I decided to write a sermon on Wednesday morning. And I did it, a full one that with some careful editing might even have had some potential. And then the events of Wednesday afternoon hit, and they hit hard, upending every plan and dominating our attention. It reminded me of one of my favorite quips of our communities and indeed the Jewish people's teacher, Rabbi Jack Reimer, a prolific sermon writer. He says his recurring nightmare as a rabbi is that just before the high holy days, peace will break out in the Middle East, and he will have to change all of his sermons. This was not peace in the Middle East, not hardly. And the events which riveted our nation and caught our legislators in a maelstrom of frightful destruction and even threatened our democracy will be spoken about over this Shabbat. The sermon I wrote is too long to share with you tonight. Yet even on Wednesday morning, it included the words, "It has been a most interesting week." But I still want to share a bit of it with you. I started it by talking about concessions. And I included a wonderful story about the 1969 Ryder Cup international golf competition when Jack Nicklaus conceded a final 2-foot putt to Tony Jacklin. The Americans had already secured the cup, but if Jacklin missed that putt, he would lose his match to Nicklaus. Big Jack knew that a tie in his match was enough for his team to win, and there was no reason to embarrass a fellow competitor unnecessarily. Walking off the green arm in arm, he said to the European, "I don't believe you would have missed that, but I'd never give you the opportunity in these circumstances." It is still considered to be one of the great acts of sportsmanship and grace on a golf course or anywhere else. And in reflecting on that story and the events of this week, I thought of how much of this absolutely disruptive event would have been avoided had the president acknowledged loss and conceded, as every single one of his one-term predecessors has also done. A concession is a statement rife with disappointment and sadness, and it is also an act that ensures continuity, inspires confidence, and avoids fanning the flames of anger and resentment of those who desired but did not achieve a different result. Sometimes, as it is on the golf course, so it is in life and even in government. Fair play, grace in victory, and dignity in defeat are all very important. A concession is also a mark of humility, a trait that our Musar tradition defines in part as the capacity to take up the right amount of space depending on the moment and the circumstances. One memorable example is someone whose job it is to direct traffic at a busy intersection. While doing her job, she has to take command, be a big presence, project authority to keep people safe. If she goes home and does not temper that energy, does not reduce her footprint, there will be no room for anyone else. Humility in Judaism is not self-negation. It is the right balance of affirmation and affirmation of self-worth and leaving space for others to affirm their own. I'll be direct. One of the worst parts of the last 4 years, not unique in American history, but not seen at this level for quite a while, is the vilification of political opponents as deranged or insane, as animals, as communists, anarchists, as little, as ugly, as losers, as liars. People got so tired of it, they stopped calling it out for what it was. And it was wrong. And it was wrong to stop identifying it as such. We should not make that mistake again. Tomorrow, we begin to read once again the narrative of our greatest leader, of Moshe Rabbeinu, who grows into his role. His whole career is defined by his humility. He did not want this job and tried to reject it, not once, not twice, but at least 3 times. And later on, even after he has led the people for years, he is attacked because of who he marries. And the Torah tells us this was undeserved, not because Moses was beyond reproach, but because Moshe anav me'od mikol ha'adam. Moses was a very humble man, more so than any other man on earth. And even later than that, he does not object to his leadership being transferred to Joshua. In fact, it is in the book of Numbers that he asked God to appoint someone who will lead the people so that they may not be like sheep that have no shepherd. And that is when some of Moses' authority is transferred. Even at the end of Devarim, when full authority is vested in Joshua, Moses wants to live, of course, but not so he can continue on with the burden and responsibility of leadership. He has rightfully at that point had enough of leading the cantankerous and defiant Israelites who he has served and loved for 40 years. No, instead, Moses hopes that a merciful God will commute his sentence and he will be able to set foot on the soil of the promised land. Healthy humility leads one to the necessary conclusion that they may be important, but they are not irreplaceable. These are both hallmarks of how others have paved the way to this moment and how we build sturdy bridges from the present to the future. Our democracy is built on both, and its infrastructure has been tested and even strained over this astoundingly tumultuous time. If we need yet another reminder that our normal has included respect for norms, which have included orderly, timely acceptance of defeat, I can point you not just to touching and graceful videos of candidates and presidents congratulating a victor and wishing them well, but also to another one. If you drive north and west for about 3.5 hours, you will reach what I can only assume is a very beautiful private golf club. The 2 co-designers of its golf course are Jack Nicklaus and Tony Jacklin. And it has a unique name, one that immortalizes a moment of sportsmanship, of humility, of seeking to avoid even your opponent's embarrassment, and which demonstrates how not just to celebrate victory, but also how to accept loss. It is called simply the concession. Shabbat Shalom. We'll continue with Kiddush, which you can find on page. Thank you indeed. How good it is when brothers and sisters can dwell together in harmony. Shabbat Shalom to everyone. We are about to open up a new book of our Torah. It is called, of course, the 5 books of Moses, yet Moses appears in only 4 of them as he comes on the scene today in Parshat Shemot. As a reminder to many, I'm sure, it includes a narrative of his birth, his mother's courageous decision to save his life by putting him in a basket that will float down the Nile, his rescue by the daughter of Pharaoh. We get scant few details about his childhood, though the Midrash seeks to fill that in. Moses demonstrates leadership capacity from an early age. He leaves the palace and shows he is capable of being an upstander rather than a bystander. He kills an Egyptian who is beating an Israelite slave. He leaves Egypt, gets married, gets a job. So it goes. He becomes a shepherd, which is a role that tradition sees as a precursor to his shepherding a people for 40 years. And finally, God reveals something of God's voice at the burning bush and calls him to leadership. You may recall, too, that Moses does not exactly jump at the opportunity. He rejects the offer not once, not twice, but 3 times. He offers excuse after excuse, reason after reason. But God is persistent, and ultimately Moses accedes and goes to Pharaoh for the start of a long negotiation. Some reticence to lead and some consistent doubt as to whether you are really the right person for the job, and striving to become the right. These are all precursors to good leadership. And here are 3 more. As we spoke about last night, humility and leadership in Jewish tradition go hand in hand. In fact, humility is an irreplaceable foundation and even a source of the other qualities that identify potential and eventual success in leadership. It means the capacity to put others first, to see and to meet their needs, and to recognize your own limitations before pointing out those of others. These are all aspects of this critical trait of anavah, of humility. Second, a leader embraces and participates in the trappings and pageantry of leadership only as a reflection of honor for the people who have called on him or her to lead, and never to satisfy their own sense of importance or need for affirmation. And lastly, in the normal and peaceful course of events, when it is your time to go gracefully. We know through history that this is less rather than more common. But America has made it the gold standard that the world has looked to as a model to be emulated. That gold has been tarnished throughout these months of doubt, lies, conspiracy theories, and now attempted insurrection. So let's shine it back up again and relight the beacon of freedom this country has always strived, however imperfectly, to reflect out to the world. We're going to transition now to the saying of the prayer for our country. And saying the prayer for our country this week presents an opportunity for intense reflection and gratitude that the terrible events of this week did not turn out even worse. I want to begin by expressing our condolences to the family of U.S. Capitol Police Officer Brian D. Sicknick, who went to work every day knowing there was potential danger, but whose leadership surely let him down by too slowly recognizing what was an approaching grave and mortal threat. His death is a tragedy. As his older brother Ken said, Brian is a hero, and that is what we would like people to remember. On a personal note, I express for all of us how glad and relieved we are that our friend and B'nai Torah member, Congressman Ted Deutsch, is okay, together with his colleagues. In a moment of incitement and heated confrontation, when reporters were being threatened and their equipment destroyed, when passions could easily spiral out of control to the detriment of us all, the fact that elected officials and their staff and the staff of the Capitol saw few injuries and no deaths, except for Officer Sicknick, is a great relief. I am struck perhaps too strongly by the image of the congressional aides who ferried the mahogany boxes containing the tallies of the Electoral College off the floor. What would have happened had those been found by the horde that invaded this sacred national space? I think it is a fair prediction that they likely would have been destroyed. Symbolically, that would have been damaging, but it also would not have mattered. Our nation is not a flag or a mahogany box or the parchment on which words are written or a building or any weapon, monument, or memorial. We are an idea, and only as good and strong and viable as the people who are willing to continually engage in the project of American progress. Our history has not been as smooth a march forward as we might sometimes think it has been. And this was not the last time the fabric of our nation will be pulled and strained, but hopefully not torn. Yeats famously wrote, "Things fall apart, the center cannot hold. Mere anarchy is loosed upon the world. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity." We did not fall into such a deep pit, for the center held. The best who hold a range of ideologies and have a variety of ideas that can be meaningfully and respectfully debated, the best on all sides retained their conviction. And the passionate intensity of an angry mob eventually abated, this time. We must not underestimate the damage done, the reflection needed, the rebuilding now required, and all of us play a part in making it happen. May we find the strength, focus, and commitment to effective and constructive ways to do so. And may God bless the United States of America. Excerpted from our High Holy Day Moxer, we pray, our God and God of our ancestors, with mercy accept our prayer on behalf of our country and its government. Uproot from all hearts hatred and malice, jealousy and strife. Plant among those of different nationalities and faiths who dwell in our nation love and companionship, peace and friendship. May it therefore be your will that our land be a blessing to all who dwell on earth and cause us to dwell in friendship and freedom. And let us say, Amen. We turn, as we always do, our hearts, thoughts to the east and pray for the welfare of our beloved state of Israel, her security, and her stridings toward peace, and pray for all of her citizens and members of the IDF and security services, of course, medical professionals, first responders there, as well as here. Page 149 at the top of the page.
Avinu, Avinu, שבשמיים, צור ישראל וגואלו. אבינו, אבינו, שבשמיים, צור ישראל וגואלו. ברך, ברך את מדינת